The July sun spilled across the Florida sky, painting the highway in gold as the Thompson family's minivan hummed southward. The air smelled of sunscreen and fast food fries, and laughter echoed through the car's open windows. Michael Thompson, 38, held the steering wheel with an easy confidence, the kind of quiet steadiness that made his wife, Laura, feel safe. Their 3 kids, Ryan, 12, Emma, 9, and little Sophie, 5, were buzzing in the back seat, counting license plates and arguing about which roller coaster to ride first once they reached Orlando. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that uncover real-life mysteries just like this one. Michael loved these moments, their rare escapes from the routine of his small mechanic shop in Atlanta. The past year had been tough, business was slowing down, and bills seemed to grow faster than customers. But this trip was meant to be a reset, a week away from worries, just a family chasing laughter and Florida sun. Laura leaned her head back against the seat and smiled. "Feels good to get out of the city, huh?" "Yeah," Michael said, glancing at her. "No phone calls, no late nights at the garage, just us." "Just us," she repeated softly, her tone holding something between hope and exhaustion. As they crossed into Florida, signs for orange groves and roadside attractions flashed by. The kids begged to stop at a small fruit stand off the highway. Michael gave in, pulling over beneath a canopy of moss-draped oaks. The air was thick with humidity and the sweet tang of citrus. A local vendor handed Sophie a slice of watermelon, juice dripping down her chin as she giggled. For a moment, everything felt picture-perfect, a slice of American summer. Yet underneath that calm surface, something heavy lingered in Michael's chest. His mind wandered to the shop he'd left behind and the recent argument with his business partner, Ethan Blake. Ethan had accused him of hiding money. Michael, in turn, had found invoices that didn't add up. He'd meant to sort it all out after the trip, but the unease clung to him like the sticky Florida air. Back in the van, Laura noticed his silence. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said after a pause, "just thinking about the road ahead." They drove deeper into central Florida, where pine trees grew dense and shadows stretched long over the asphalt. The highway signs became fewer, the radio static stronger. The kids eventually dozed off, their heads leaning against each other. Night approached faster than they expected. Laura checked the map. They were near Ocala, a stretch known for its endless forest roads. "Should we stop for the night?" she asked. Michael shook his head gently. "Let's get a bit further. We'll find a motel before midnight." The headlights cut through the dark, 2 narrow beams slicing into the unknown. Behind them, the fruit stand lights faded, swallowed by the forest. Ahead, the road stretched on, quiet, empty, and waiting. The Thompsons were never seen alive again. The Florida morning was hot and unnervingly still when a passing truck driver spotted the abandoned minivan. It sat just off a narrow road outside Ocala National Forest, tilted slightly on the sandy shoulder, as if it had rolled to a stop and simply run out of purpose. The doors were unlocked, one of them slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old food and spilled juice. The driver called the sheriff's office, assuming it was a simple case of car trouble. But when Deputy Karen Rios arrived, her instincts told her something was wrong. The vehicle looked lived in, yet deserted. There were maps scattered across the passenger seat, a bag of toys open on the floor, and 3 small juice boxes, each with a straw halfway pulled out. A bag of chips rested on the dashboard. "Looks like they just stepped out," one of the deputies muttered, scratching his head. Karen leaned into the vehicle, studying every detail. "No keys, no wallets," she said quietly. And no sign of struggle. The discovery sent ripples through Marion County. Within hours, news vans crowded the forest entrance, reporters whispering into microphones about a missing family from Atlanta. Laura's parents drove through the night to Florida, faces pale with exhaustion and fear. When they reached the sheriff's office, Laura's mother clutched a photo of her daughter and grandchildren, refusing to let it go. "She wouldn't just leave," she told Karen. "Laura's the kind of person who calls if she's 5 minutes late picking up the kids from school. Something happened out there." Karen nodded. She'd seen plenty of disappearances, runaways, accidents, but this felt different. There was no pattern, no reason for 5 people to vanish at once. A search team was organized by noon. Volunteers, deputies, and K-9 units swept through the dense pine and oak that surrounded the area. The Florida heat pressed down hard, turning every breath into effort. The forest was alive with insects, their endless hum filling the silence that followed every shouted name. By sunset, they found nothing. No footprints, no personal belongings, not even tire tracks beyond those of the minivan. It was as if the Thompsons had dissolved into the humid air. At the station, maps were pinned to a corkboard, lines drawn in every direction from where the van had been found. The sheriff ordered helicopters for the next morning. Karen stayed late, flipping through Michael Thompson's file, his business license, family photos, driver's record. Everything painted him as an ordinary man. That night, national media caught wind of the story. "The Vanishing Thompsons," one headline read. Television anchors described a happy family, a mechanic, a mother, 3 children. Viewers across the country watched, wondering how a family could disappear on a clear summer day without leaving a single trace. At dawn, the search resumed. Helicopters sliced through the mist rising from the forest. On the ground, Karen Rios walked along a narrow dirt path, her boots pressing into the soft mud. She paused, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. Somewhere in that vast green silence she felt it, a presence of something unfinished, something watching. Before that road trip, Michael Thompson's life had followed a quiet rhythm. Every morning, before the Georgia sun crept over the rooftops, he'd open the small garage he co-owned on Pine Street. The scent of motor oil and metal filled the air as he rolled up the door, greeting customers with a nod and a smile. He wasn't the kind of man who complained. He worked with steady hands, fixing what was broken, engines, transmissions, sometimes even hearts that just needed someone to listen. His employees respected him, especially for his honesty. "Mike never cheats a man," one of them would say. But his partner Ethan Blake saw the world differently. Ethan was slick, ambitious, and always had one eye on expansion. He talked about turning their shop into a chain, borrowing big and taking risks. Michael preferred stability, something solid he could leave to his kids. At home, life was simpler. Laura taught 2nd grade at a nearby school, balancing lesson plans and bedtime stories. Their marriage had its ups and downs, mostly around money. There were late nights when bills lay spread across the kitchen table and silence hung heavier than the ticking clock. But even then, Michael tried to stay optimistic. "Once summer's over, business will pick up again," he'd tell her, rubbing her shoulders. Laura would smile faintly, though her eyes revealed the weight she carried. "I just want you to take care of yourself. You've been tired, Michael." "I'm fine," he'd reply, not quite believing it. Neighbors described them as a normal family, friendly, dependable, the kind who hosted barbecues and waved at strangers. But beneath that calm surface, Michael had begun to notice things that didn't add up. 2 months before the trip, he'd discovered discrepancies in their financial records, invoices for parts he'd never ordered, deposits that vanished. When he asked Ethan, the man brushed it off. "Accounting errors, Mike. Don't lose sleep over it." But Michael wasn't convinced. One evening after closing the shop, he stayed late and went through the paperwork again. The deeper he looked, the clearer the pattern became. Someone was moving money, and it wasn't him. He didn't tell Laura, not yet. She'd been planning their family trip for weeks, excited to finally take the kids to Florida. He didn't want to ruin that. Still, the unease clung to him. In church on Sunday, while Laura sang beside him, Michael's thoughts wandered to what he might confront when they returned. Deputy Karen Rios, who would later become the lead investigator, remembered Michael from those days. Her father used to take his truck to the shop. He was solid, she recalled years later. Didn't talk much, but he had this calm way about him. The kind of man who fixes things instead of walking away. It made his disappearance all the more haunting. The week before the road trip, Michael had stopped by Ethan's office. Their conversation grew tense. Neighbors heard raised voices, then silence. No one knew what was said that day. But 2 days later, the Thompson family packed their van, and Michael promised Laura, "This trip is exactly what we need." He didn't know how right he was, or how final those words would become. The morning after the Thompsons' van was discovered, the search began in earnest. Deputies, volunteers, and local rangers fanned out across the edges of Ocala National Forest, moving through the thick undergrowth where sunlight broke in scattered rays. The forest was a labyrinth of cypress, palmetto, and pine, the air heavy with moisture and the hum of insects. Every sound seemed to carry weight: the crunch of boots, the distant call of a hawk, the faint rustle that made hearts jump for a second. Deputy Karen Rios led the first sweep. She had grown up only an hour from there, knew the swamps, the sudden sinkholes, and the kind of quiet that could swallow a person whole. As she walked, her radio crackled with updates. Nothing on the East Trail. I found tire marks, but they fade fast. Still no sign of the family. Around noon, Laura's brother, David Collins, arrived from Georgia. He was red-eyed from the drive, clutching a photograph of his sister and the kids. "I'm not leaving till they're found," he told Karen, his voice breaking. She looked at him and saw the same determination she'd seen in other families who refused to accept loss. "We'll find something," she said softly. "I promise we're not giving up." As the search widened, locals joined in: teachers, hunters, retired firefighters. They moved in coordinated lines, calling out the names. Michael, Laura, Ryan. The forest swallowed their voices. A volunteer found a child's shoe near a clearing, but it turned out to belong to another family who had camped weeks earlier. False leads piled up, each one deepening the ache of uncertainty. By sunset, heat turned to a sticky twilight haze. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades cutting through the humid air. The red and blue lights of patrol cars painted the treetops as reporters gathered near the main road. Cameras clicked, voices murmured about the mystery. An entire family vanished without a trace. At headquarters, Karen studied the map pinned to the wall. Her pen traced the highway where the van had been found, the dirt roads leading into the forest. Something about the location bothered her. "Why here?" she whispered. "There's nothing out this way." Her partner, Deputy Mills, leaned over. "Maybe they took a wrong turn. Maybe the car broke down and they went looking for help." Karen frowned. "Then where are the footprints? The trail should tell us something." "It's like they disappeared mid-step." Meanwhile, David organized vigils back in Atlanta, urging anyone with information to come forward. Flyers with smiling faces of the Thompson family appeared on light poles, gas stations, and grocery stores all across Florida. People wanted to help, but the truth remained buried somewhere between the trees. Late that night, Karen sat alone by her patrol car, the glow of her flashlight dimming. The forest whispered around her, frogs croaking in the distance. She closed her eyes, trying to silence her mind, but one image kept returning. That open van door, swinging gently in the summer breeze, as if someone had left it that way on purpose. Days turned into weeks, and the Thompson case refused to fade from the headlines. What began as a search for a missing family had evolved into something heavier, an unanswered question hanging over the quiet Florida town. Locals whispered theories in grocery store lines and church parking lots. Some said the family had been taken. Others believed Michael had planned it himself. Every voice carried a different version of the same mystery. Karen Rios sat in her office late one evening, the hum of the fluorescent light above her barely masking the static from the police scanner. She flipped through witness statements again, searching for something she might have missed. That's when a report caught her attention. A gas station clerk 2 towns over had seen a man resembling Michael Thompson the night after the disappearance. Alone, buying water and a pack of cigarettes. Karen's pulse quickened as she read. The description fit too neatly. The dark hair, the denim shirt, the calm voice. But the timing didn't make sense. "If it was him," she murmured, "where were the others?" She and Deputy Mills drove out to the station the next morning. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, was certain. "He looked tired," she said, tapping her fingers on the counter, "like a man who'd been through hell, paid in cash and drove off toward the West Road." Karen thanked her and took notes, but as she left, doubt lingered. The security footage had already been taped over. All they had was a memory. Back at the sheriff's department, whispers had begun to spread. Reporters hinted that Michael might have staged the whole thing, running from debt or family trouble. The more people talked, the less they remembered he was a father of 3, a man with no history of running from anything. Meanwhile, Laura's friend, Marlene Ortiz, came forward with something new. She told Karen she'd received a voicemail from Laura 2 days before the trip. She sounded nervous, Marlene said, her voice trembling. She said Michael had been acting distracted, like something was bothering him at work. She asked if we could talk after they got back. That voicemail, now erased by time and old phone systems, became another ghost in the file, one more fragment of a life frozen in 1998. Karen started digging into Michael's background again, focusing on his business. The deeper she went, the more inconsistencies appeared. Bank statements that didn't match, a missing payment to a supplier, and finally, a pattern of withdrawals connected to his business partner, Ethan Blake. When Karen called Ethan in for questioning, his tone was smooth but defensive. "Look," he said, crossing his arms. Mike was stressed. He talked about closing the shop for good. I told him to take a break. Maybe he snapped, I don't know. Karen watched him carefully. "You two argued, didn't you?" Ethan's eyes shifted. "Every business has tension," he replied. "But he wasn't the type to vanish. If you ask me, someone wanted him gone." That last line stayed with her long after he left. The way he said someone, as if he already knew who. By the end of that summer, the Thompson disappearance had become more than a local tragedy. It had turned into a Florida legend. The story lingered in the air like humidity, impossible to escape. In diners across Ocala, people still pointed at the old newspaper clippings taped near the registers. Truckers swapped theories over coffee refills, and children whispered about the family that vanished whenever they passed the edge of the forest. Karen Rios, now back to routine patrols, couldn't let it go. Though the official investigation had gone cold, she kept a small box in her home office, a folder of notes, photographs, and maps she refused to forget. Sometimes, when the nights were too quiet, she would take it out, lay everything across the table, and stare at the same unanswered question: where did they go? Years passed, leads dried up. Laura's parents held a memorial service. Though without bodies, it felt more like surrender than closure. Karen attended in uniform, standing near the back. When the pastor spoke of faith and forgiveness, she found herself gripping her badge a little tighter. Forgiveness didn't feel right, not yet. The town changed over time. The fruit stand near the highway closed. The once busy search area became overgrown with weeds. Still, the Thompson story refused to fade. Every so often, someone would claim to have seen Michael, a man who looked just like him at a gas station in Alabama or checking into a motel near Tampa. Each sighting collapsed under scrutiny, but the whispers kept the myth alive. By 2008, the case had become a ghost of its own, filed away in a metal drawer in the sheriff's archives. Yet for the people who lived through it, the memory was never filed away. The Thompson children's faces on those missing posters had become symbols of what the town had lost, its sense of safety. Karen retired from active duty the following year, but never truly stepped away. She'd become known for her persistence, for refusing to let forgotten names stay forgotten. When local news stations ran anniversary pieces about the disappearance, she was often asked to comment. "It's not about mystery," she'd tell them. "It's about people who deserve to come home." Some residents had their own theories. "Michael found out something he shouldn't have," said one old man at the diner. "That's why they disappeared." Others believed something darker, that the family had met a tragic end in the woods and would never be found. Karen didn't entertain rumors, but one night, nearly 20 years after the van was found, she received a call from an old colleague. "You might want to see this," he said. "The state's reopening a few cold cases. DNA retesting, new methods." The Thompsons are on the list. She sat silently, phone in hand, as rain pattered against her window. After all those years, the file she'd kept close might finally speak. She looked at the old photo of Michael and Laura pinned above her desk. "All right," she whispered. "Let's finish this." In early 2018, a new sheriff took office in Marion County, Daniel Porter, a man known for his methodical approach and his belief that no case was ever truly closed. On his second week in charge, he walked into the evidence archive, a grey room lined with boxes marked unsolved. He paused at one box, its label faded, Thompson Family, 1998. Something about the weight of it, the dust, the silence, made him pull it from the shelf. Porter carried it to his office and began reading through the old reports. He was only a teenager when the Thompsons disappeared, but he remembered the headlines, the faces, the haunting image of the empty van. That night he made a decision. He would reopen the case. When he announced it at a staff meeting, the room went quiet. Some deputies exchanged glances. "That case has been cold 20 years, one said. Porter nodded. Then it's time it got warm again. He authorized a full evidence review. The team sent biological samples for modern DNA testing, ordered new forensic scans of the items collected from the van, and began tracking down everyone involved. Technology had advanced since 1998. Methods that didn't exist then could now speak with precision. As results trickled in, Porter noticed something unusual in the original notes. A partial DNA trace on one of the van's seat fabrics, logged but never matched. He sent it for retesting. Days later, the lab called back. "Sheriff, you'll want to see this," the technician said. "We've got a new match in the database." Porter leaned back, heartbeat quickening. "To who?" "Can't say yet. Still processing. But it's not one of the family." For the first time in 20 years, there was movement. The local paper caught wind of the reopening and ran a front-page story. Residents of Ocala couldn't believe it. The Thompsons again. Coffee shops buzzed with talk, and old theories resurfaced. People who had long given up hope found themselves drawn back to that same stretch of highway. Sheriff Porter decided to reach out to someone who knew the case better than anyone, retired Deputy Karen Rios. She was living in Gainesville now, spending her days tending a small garden and volunteering at a youth center. When she picked up the phone and heard his name, her voice softened. "I wondered if that call would ever come," she said. "I'm reopening the Thompson case," Porter told her. "I could use your eyes on this." Karen hesitated only a moment before answering, "I'll be there tomorrow." When she walked into the sheriff's office the next morning, her hair streaked with grey, Porter handed her the old case file. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Every page felt like a ghost returning. 20 years, she whispered. Let's see what time forgot. Outside, the Florida sky burned bright over the courthouse. For the first time in decades, the Thompson case was alive again, and the truth, long buried, was beginning to stir. Weeks into the reopened investigation, Sheriff Porter and Karen Rios sat surrounded by stacks of files, their desks buried under old reports and new test results. Most leads led nowhere, but Porter's instinct told him the answer had always been close, buried under 20 years of assumptions. Then one morning, a call came from a man in Alabama. His voice trembled as he spoke. "My name's Ray Coleman," he said. "I was a truck driver back in the late 90s. I saw something I still think about." Porter leaned forward. "Go on." "It was around July of '98, somewhere near Ocala. A minivan had pulled off to the side of the road. I remember because I saw a pickup right behind it. Dark green, older model. 2 men were arguing. The driver of the van looked like the guy from those news stories. Michael Thompson, I think. I didn't stop, but I remember thinking it didn't look right." Karen and Porter exchanged a look. After all this time, a fresh witness. "Do you remember the make of the truck?" she asked. "Maybe a Chevy," Coleman said. "Couldn't see the plate, but it had some kind of sticker on the back window. A business logo, maybe." That detail caught Karen's attention. She scribbled the words business logo in her notebook, underlining them twice. Back at the department, Porter ordered the old evidence box re-examined. Among the contents was a VHS tape labeled Convenience Store, 7/11/98. It had been dismissed years earlier as unusable, grainy, low quality, no audio. But now, with enhanced software, the footage could be digitized and clarified. They waited as the IT tech ran the conversion. Static filled the screen at first, then an image slowly appeared. A small gas station dimly lit, timestamp flickering. A van pulled up to the pumps. Michael Thompson stepped out. He looked tense, scanning the area before heading inside. Minutes later, another vehicle pulled in behind him. A dark green pickup. The driver emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a cap. The two men spoke near the pumps, movements sharp, gestures tight with anger. The recording had no sound, but the tension was unmistakable. Karen leaned closer, heart pounding. "Zoom in on the truck." The technician adjusted the focus. Through the blur, a faint white logo appeared on the door. Blake Automotive Repair. Porter exhaled slowly. "Ethan Blake," he said. Michael's business partner. Karen stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. For 2 decades, Ethan's name had hovered in the background of every theory, every conversation. But seeing his logo next to Michael that night changed everything. Porter folded his arms. That means Ethan followed him. They met out there. For what? An argument? A deal? Or a reckoning, Karen said quietly. For the first time, they had something solid. Visual proof that Michael and Ethan had crossed paths the night the Thompsons vanished. It wasn't the answer, not yet. But it was a door opening into a truth long buried under lies and silence. And once that door opened, there would be no closing it again. By the time the footage surfaced, Ethan Blake had long reinvented himself. He was living 200 miles north in Jacksonville, the owner of a thriving auto dealership, and a face often seen at local charity events. On Sundays, he sat in the front pew of a brick church downtown, his hand resting gently on his wife's shoulder. To the community, he was the model of redemption, a hard-working man who'd built a second chance from nothing. Sheriff Porter and Karen Rios watched his public life unfold through screens and clippings. "He fits right back into the kind of man who hides behind good deeds," Karen said, tapping the photo of him shaking hands with a city official. "People like that count on time to wash away the past." Porter nodded. "But time's what we're taking back." They began building a profile, retracing Ethan's steps after 1998. Within 2 years of the disappearance, he'd sold his share of the Atlanta garage, paid off a series of debts, and moved to Florida with a new business loan, cash backed by collateral that didn't seem to exist. Karen found the paper trail thin but suspicious. "He had money he couldn't explain," she said, flipping through the documents, "and he didn't hesitate to leave." When Porter requested an interview under the pretense of revisiting old cases, Ethan agreed without hesitation. He met them in his office, sunlight streaming through tall windows, the smell of polished wood heavy in the air. "Sheriff Porter," Ethan said, extending his hand, his smile confident, "and Karen Rios, haven't heard that name in years." Karen's reply was calm but edged. "We're looking into some new evidence related to Michael Thompson." Ethan's expression barely shifted. "After all this time?" "I thought that case was put to rest." Porter opened a folder and slid a photo across the desk, the still image from the restored tape. Michael standing near his van, Ethan's truck behind him. For a fraction of a second, Ethan froze. Then he gave a short, practiced laugh. "Well, that's not much of a revelation, is it? I saw Mike that night. We talked. He was upset." Karen met his eyes. "Upset about what?" "Business," Ethan said quickly. "He'd been under a lot of pressure. I told him to take some time off. Maybe he finally did." Porter leaned forward. "And you never thought to tell the police you saw him hours before his family disappeared?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I didn't think it mattered." "I didn't want to drag myself into some wild theory." Karen's instincts told her he was lying, not recklessly, but with the ease of someone who'd done it for years. As she watched him, she saw the faint tremor in his hand, the twitch near his eye when Michael's name came up. When they left, Porter exhaled. "He's hiding something." Karen didn't answer immediately. She glanced back through the glass door, watching Ethan adjust his tie, pretending composure. "Yes," she said finally, "and now he knows we know." Over the next several weeks, Ethan Blake maintained his calm exterior, but Sheriff Porter could sense the cracks forming beneath it. He'd agreed to more interviews, though each one revealed less than the last. His tone was measured, his eyes steady, yet there was always a delay before every answer, as if he were carefully constructing the next line of defense. Karen Rios had seen it before, the look of a man rehearsing innocence. She spent her evenings cross-referencing old statements, searching for inconsistencies. In the 1998 reports, Ethan had said he hadn't spoken to Michael in weeks before the family vanished. Now he admitted to seeing him the same night. That alone was enough to reopen him as a prime suspect. One afternoon, Porter brought Ethan into the interrogation room. The walls were bare, the air humming with quiet tension. He set down a folder and spoke evenly. "Ethan, we ran new DNA analysis from the Thompson van. You want to guess what we found?" Ethan smiled faintly, almost dismissive. "I assume you're going to tell me." "Your fingerprints," Porter said, "on the door handle, passenger side. That wasn't in the original report, because we didn't have the technology then to lift them properly." "Care to explain?" Ethan's expression didn't change, but his fingers drummed once against the table before he caught himself. "I worked with Michael," he said slowly. "We shared vehicles sometimes. That van was in and out of the shop. You're stretching." Karen spoke quietly from across the table. "And the missing money from your joint account?" "The one that vanished right before the trip." Ethan's smile faltered. "I told you before, Michael handled the books. I don't know what he did with it." Porter leaned forward. "So you're saying the man who disappeared with his wife and kids also embezzled his own money? That's your story?" Silence. Ethan's jaw tightened. Finally he looked up, eyes cold. "You think you've got something, Sheriff?" "You've got nothing. You're chasing ghosts." But Porter wasn't convinced. Every time Ethan denied something, he revealed more, his controlled demeanor slipping word by word. When they ended the session, Karen felt the weight of unfinished truth pressing down on them both. Outside the room, Porter exhaled. "He's lying," he said. Karen nodded. "And he's too calm about it." "That's not defense, it's habit." In the following days, Karen revisited the old evidence site where the van was found. The forest had changed, but not enough to erase the feeling she'd carried for 20 years. The air still smelled of pine and damp earth. The wind still moved through the trees like a whisper of unfinished stories. She crouched near where the van once sat, running her fingers across the soil. Somewhere here, she thought, is the truth Ethan's been hiding. As the sun dipped below the tree line, her phone buzzed, a message from Porter. "Stay ready. We might have something new." She stood slowly, heart pounding. After 2 decades, the silence around the Thompson case was starting to crack. The breakthrough came not from the lab, but from a volunteer. It was late spring when a drone pilot, part of a civilian search group that specialized in cold cases, contacted the sheriff's office. His voice trembled over the phone. "I think I found something," he said. "There's metal under the marshland near Juniper Creek, something big buried." By dawn the next morning, Sheriff Porter, Karen Rios, and a forensic team stood at the edge of that swampy expanse. The Florida heat was relentless, the air thick with mosquitoes and the smell of wet earth. As the excavator began to dig, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the stillness. The ground gave way slowly, revealing what looked like the rusted shell of a vehicle. Karen felt her chest tighten. "Please, let this be it," she whispered. When the mud was cleared, the truth emerged. A crushed and corroded van, its color long lost to rust and decay. The number on the VIN plate matched exactly, the Thompson family's missing vehicle. After 20 years, it had been lying there, hidden beneath layers of mud and time. The recovery team worked with care, documenting everything. Inside the vehicle, they found fragments, fabric, jewelry, a faded photograph of 3 children in Disney shirts. Karen couldn't speak for a long moment. The photo, though water-damaged and almost colorless, was unmistakable. Porter's voice was low. Howie finally brought them home. But as forensic specialists combed through the wreck, it became clear this was no accident. The van's undercarriage bore signs of deliberate damage. The front axle cracked as if from a forced impact. And there, near the driver's seat, they found something chilling. A piece of fabric with traces of adhesive tape and a faint smear of blood. Karen turned to Porter. "This wasn't a crash," she said quietly. "This was planned." Over the following days, the site was treated as an active crime scene. News of the discovery spread like wildfire, drawing crowds and reporters who'd grown up hearing about the case. The town of Ocala stood still, every conversation returning to the same question. Who could have done this? In the evidence tent, Karen examined a small metallic object pulled from the marsh, a keychain shaped like a wrench, engraved with the initials MT. She closed her hand around it. For years, she'd imagined what happened to that family. Now she could feel the weight of the truth in her palm. Later that night, sitting in her car by the edge of the site, Karen stared at the reflection of flashing lights on the water. For 2 decades, she had chased ghosts, hoping for something tangible. Now she had it, but instead of relief, she felt the chill of what it meant. Porter approached quietly, resting a hand on the car door. "Karen," he said, "we found prints inside the van. They're being processed now. If they match who I think they might—" She met his eyes, heart pounding. "Then this isn't over," she said. 2 weeks after the van was recovered, the forensics lab called with confirmation. The fingerprints found on the driver's side matched Ethan Blake. Sheriff Porter stared at the report for a long moment, his jaw set, then handed it silently to Karen. She read it twice, her pulse quickening. 20 years of doubt, rumor, and speculation had narrowed down to a single truth. They didn't rush it. Porter wanted the case airtight before making a move. They compiled financial records, reconstructed timelines, and gathered every piece of testimony that tied Ethan to Michael Thompson in those final days. Karen revisited old files, adding her handwritten notes from 1998. Each page built a clearer picture: money gone missing, rising tension, and one man's motive growing in the shadows. When the warrant came through, the sky over Jacksonville was heavy with gray clouds. Porter and 2 deputies approached Ethan's dealership mid-morning. Customers milled about, unaware. Inside, Ethan stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear when the deputies entered. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief as Porter stepped forward. "Ethan Blake," Porter said, voice steady. "You're under arrest for the murder of Michael Thompson and his family." For a heartbeat, the entire showroom went silent. Then the sound of cuffs clicking against Ethan's wrists broke the stillness. "What the hell are you talking about?" he snapped, his polished composure shattering. "You can't. This is insane." Karen watched him closely, noting the flush creeping up his neck, the tremor in his hands. "We have your prints inside the van," she said quietly. "And we have proof you followed Michael that night." Ethan turned toward her, eyes blazing. "He called me. He was losing it. I was trying to help him." "Help?" Porter echoed. "By hiding evidence? By lying for 20 years? Ethan didn't answer. As he was led outside, cameras flashed and reporters shouted his name. The arrest spread through Florida within hours, shaking the community that once praised him as a model citizen. Back in Ocala, people gathered in disbelief. At the diner, conversations halted mid-sentence as the news replayed on the TV above the counter. "I knew it," one man muttered. "I knew he wasn't clean." Others shook their heads, struggling to reconcile the smiling businessman they'd trusted with the man in handcuffs. That night, Karen sat in her office, the sound of rain tapping softly against the windows. She opened her old case box, the photos, the reports, the faded flyers, and exhaled. "It's him," she said under her breath. It was always him. Porter entered quietly, holding 2 coffee cups. "You did it," he said. "After all these years." She looked up, tired but resolute. "No," she replied. "We just found the truth. Justice still has to do the rest." Across the state, Michael Thompson's now adult children watched the news in silence. Their faces were older, hardened by loss, but their eyes carried something new, recognition. The man who'd stolen their father's future was finally facing his own. The courthouse in Marion County was packed on the first day of Ethan Blake's trial. The heat outside clung to the windows, while inside tension filled every seat. Reporters lined the hallway, microphones poised, whispering about the man who'd fooled an entire community for 2 decades. Ethan walked in wearing a gray suit, his face expressionless, but his eyes darted toward every camera as if still trying to control the narrative. Sheriff Porter and Karen Rios sat near the front side by side. It had been months of preparation, of reconstructing every timeline, every motive. Yet as the prosecution began their opening statement, the weight of what was lost pressed heavy in the room. Photographs of the Thompson family were displayed on a large screen. Michael smiling in his workshop, Laura holding their youngest at a birthday party. Gasps rippled through the crowd as faces long gone became painfully present again. The prosecutor, a sharp-spoken woman named Dana Ellis, laid out the story with precision. The evidence will show that Ethan Blake embezzled thousands of dollars from his business partner, Michael Thompson. When Michael discovered the fraud, he confronted Ethan just days before his disappearance. The defendant, fearing exposure and ruin, followed Michael during his family trip, an act that led to their deaths and 2 decades of silence. Ethan's defense attorney countered quickly, painting him as a scapegoat. The police need closure. They've decided to find it in the wrong man. He claimed the fingerprints in the van could have been left during business transactions years before, and argued that the state had no direct evidence tying Ethan to a crime scene. But when Karen took the stand, her calm, steady voice carried weight. She recounted every detail, how the case had haunted her, how the evidence had been dismissed, how time had finally caught up. "I believed from the beginning that something didn't add up," she said. "Now, the pieces fit. They always pointed back to him." Then came the most damning moment, the re-examination of the financial records. Experts testified that Ethan had transferred over $50,000 into hidden accounts just weeks before the trip. The dates aligned perfectly with the family's disappearance. In the gallery, Michael's eldest son sat silently, his hands clasped tight. He was 28 now, with his father's same calm expression, but his eyes were hard with grief. When Ethan was called to testify, he refused. His lawyer whispered something, but Ethan only stared ahead, jaw clenched. The courtroom fell still, waiting for words that never came. Finally, a recording was played. The last voicemail from Laura Thompson, recovered from an old answering machine found in storage. Her voice cracked with unease. "Mike, please call me back when you get this. I don't like the way Ethan's been acting. I think he's hiding something." The sound echoed through the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Karen lowered her gaze, whispering to Porter, "That's all we needed." The truth just spoke for itself. The final day of the trial arrived under a somber gray sky. The courthouse steps were crowded again. Reporters, townspeople, and strangers, drawn by the weight of a story that had lingered for 20 years. Inside, the air felt heavy, charged with the quiet that always comes before something irreversible. Ethan Blake sat at the defense table, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He hadn't spoken since refusing to testify. Sheriff Porter stood by the back wall, arms crossed. Karen Rios sat near the front, notebook in hand, though she'd stopped writing hours ago. The jurors had been out for almost 9 hours, and every minute stretched thinner than the last. When the door finally opened, the sound of footsteps filled the room. 12 faces filed in, worn by deliberation. The clerk stood, voice steady but low. "Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict?" A middle-aged woman nodded, hands trembling slightly as she held the folded paper. "We have." Karen felt her pulse in her throat. Across the aisle, Michael Thompson's grown children leaned forward, barely breathing. The foreperson read aloud, her voice breaking halfway through. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Ethan Blake, guilty." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Ethan's shoulders dropped, his composure shattering for the first time. His lawyer whispered frantically, but Ethan didn't move. He stared straight ahead, eyes empty, the reality of 20 years of deception finally pressing down on him. Porter exhaled slowly. Karen closed her eyes. The tension that had carried her through 2 decades seemed to dissolve, replaced by an exhaustion that reached bone deep. As the judge read the sentence, life imprisonment without parole, the Thompson family's eldest son, Ryan, stood in silent disbelief. His sister, Emma, pressed her hand to her face, tears spilling freely. When the proceedings ended, Ryan approached Karen quietly. "My dad," he said softly, voice shaking. "He used to say the truth always comes out, even if it takes a lifetime." Karen nodded, her throat tight. Your father was right. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, capturing the moment that marked the end of one of Florida's most haunting mysteries. Reporters shouted questions about motives, justice, forgiveness, but Karen didn't answer. She simply looked up at the sky, the clouds breaking just enough for sunlight to cut through. Later that evening, the town of Ocala held a vigil near the old highway where the Thompsons had last been seen. Candles flickered in the humid air, the scent of wax mixing with the faint sweetness of orange blossoms. Locals who'd followed the story for years stood shoulder to shoulder, their murmurs soft, part grief, part relief. Karen stepped back from the crowd, watching the lights reflect in the dark water beyond the trees. It's over, she whispered, though even as she said it, she knew the memory of that family, their laughter, their last journey, would never fully fade. Some truths, she thought, don't end with justice. They linger, because they matter. Months after the verdict, Ocala began to quiet again. The courthouse steps that had once been filled with reporters now stood empty, and the stories that had gripped the state faded from nightly news. Yet for those who had carried the case in their hearts, the Thompson children, the investigators, the community, the echoes remained. Justice had been served, but healing would take far longer. A memorial was held on a mild spring afternoon. The Thompson family was finally laid to rest in a small cemetery just outside town, the graves lined neatly beneath a row of old oak trees. Ryan, Emma, and Sophie stood side by side, no longer children, but carrying the weight of the family they lost. The service was simple, soft music, gentle words, and the sound of wind moving through the leaves. After the crowd dispersed, Karen Rios lingered near the headstones. In her hand she held a small object, a toy car, faded red, the same one she'd found years earlier in the evidence box. She knelt down and placed it beside Michael's name. You can rest now, she murmured. We found you. Behind her, Ryan approached quietly. You never gave up, he said. Karen smiled faintly. Neither did your father. He looked at her, his eyes steady. I think he'd want you to stop carrying it too. For the first time in decades, Karen felt a strange peace. She'd spent half her life chasing ghosts, but now, standing among those she'd sought to bring home, she realized closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant understanding. Later that evening, she drove along the same stretch of highway where the Thompsons had vanished. The road was wider now, smoother, the forest trimmed back by years of development. But the air still held a familiarity, the scent of pine, the hum of cicadas, the low rhythm of distant thunder. She slowed as she passed the marker placed near the site where the van had once been found. Flowers surrounded it, fresh and bright, left by strangers who'd never known the family but felt their story. Karen parked for a moment, rolling down her window. The sunset poured over the treetops, casting the forest in gold. You made it home, she whispered to the empty road. In Jacksonville, Ethan Blake began his life sentence in silence. Former employees who once admired him refused to speak his name. His wife moved away, and the business he'd built crumbled under the weight of what he'd done. Meanwhile, Ryan started a small foundation in his father's name, dedicated to helping families of cold case victims find answers. He spoke publicly for the first time that year, saying, My father believed that honesty outlives everything, even death. This is our way of proving him right. The Thompson story became part of Florida's history, taught not as tragedy, but as testimony to perseverance. Before we end, if this story moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more real stories of truth and justice that remind us why every unanswered question deserves a voice. And don't forget, click the video on your screen to continue watching another mystery that took years to solve. The road where it all began lies quiet now, but Florida still remembers.